The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the May edition of our webinar. We're pleased to have you here today. I'm Molly Hurley-Dupre from Smart Villages, and as always, we're co-hosting with our partners, the Low Carbon Energy for Development Network. Thanks for joining us here today for today's topic, which is a breath of fresh air. What's next for clean cook stoves? And we're pleased to welcome 5 excellent speakers today. First, we'll have Sumi Mehta, Senior Director of Research and Evaluation for the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves, followed by Ron Bills, Chairman and CEO of EnviroFit. Thirdly, we'll have Ruben Walker, who's the co-founder and commercial director of African Clean Energy. And Ruben, if you're online and if you can hear me, I believe you might have logged in with the wrong link. So if you take a quick look at your emails, you'll see the panelists link there and you'll be able to join us, and then I'll be able to allow you to speak. Perfect. So, and as well, we're hoping we'll have, he's had some travel challenges, so we're not sure if he's going to be able to join us, but hopefully Simon Batchelor, who's the founder of Gamos Limited. And finally, Mike Clifford, Associate Professor in the Faculty of Engineering, University of Nottingham. And we'll also be joined by Dr. Ed Brown, and he's one of my colleagues over at LCEDN, and he's going to kind of sum up the panel ahead of the Q&A and give us some food for thought. Before we get started directly into the webinar, just remember that you can send in questions throughout the webinar. Just be sure to let us know who you'd like to answer the question, and we'll be sure to do our best to take it up in the Q&A. And if we can't take it up in the Q&A, all the questions that you type in are recorded, and I pass those along to the panelists. So hopefully you can also take it up as a conversation post-webinar. You can also tweet at us. Let me just drop this into the box here so that you'll be able to see that. You can tweet at us. So Smart Villages, we're at E for Smart Villages, and LCEDN, they are at UK LCE. So please feel free to tweet at us during the webinar and share any interesting thoughts that you might have. Okay, and let's see. So before we go to our first speaker, I just want to do a couple of really quick polls. This is something I love to do just at the very beginning of the webinar, just to get to know the audience a little bit. So first of all, I want to ask you guys to tell me, where are you based? So I'll give you a few seconds just to complete this. I know people are still joining us. Where are you based? Are you based in the Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Europe and the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific, or North America? I'll just give a few seconds here so that people can continue voting. Okay, great. I think most people have voted who are going to vote. Wonderful. So that's always fun to see, and I can share this result with you. So sorry about that, but we're just welcoming our speakers, and it does look like everyone who had any travel difficulty or anything like that is with us. So we're excited to have the full panel here with you today. So I'm just going to close that poll and share the results with you. This is always kind of a fun part. So all right, so you can see that we have about 4% from Latin America and the Caribbean, 22% from Africa, 38% based in Europe and the Middle East, 9% from Asia and the Pacific. Good evening over there. Thank you for joining us so late. And 27% in North America. All right, thanks for joining us, and good morning to you all over there. We'll do one more quick poll here. Which is also about your professional background. So in what area you tend to work. Do you tend to work in the public sector, or more so the private sector in entrepreneurship? Or maybe you're an academic or working at a university. Maybe you're also from an NGO or a nonprofit. And other as a catch-all category, because those can't cover everything exactly. Okay, I'll let you guys go ahead and finish up voting there. I think almost everybody has voted yeah, let me go ahead and do that. Great. So let me share that with you. So our result there is We are a little low on the public sector and policymakers today. Hopefully those folks will join us a few minutes from now. But we've got a great turnout of people working in the private sector, people working in research, and NGOs. That's amazing. Okay, really good spread between those three categories. And we've just got to get the policymakers to dial in as well. Okay, let me go ahead and hide that. And I want to go ahead and launch into our first speaker here. If you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and ask her to share her screen. We're joined by Sumi Mehta. And Sumi Mehta, as I mentioned, she's the Senior Director for Research and Evaluation at the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves. Hi, Sumi. Let's see, you'll need to just, oh, you'll have to take yourself off of mute, sorry. Okay, wonderful. How are you doing, Sumi?
I'm fine, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us here this morning. I understand you're based on the East Coast in the U.S. So I will let you go ahead and go directly into your presentation. We're pleased to have you here with us. It's full screen and it looks perfect. So very curious to hear your presentation today. Thank you for setting the scene for us.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm going to be chatting with you a little bit today, focusing on how we can accelerate clean cooking to promote public health. And I think that as everybody on the phone here is well aware, the whole issue of household energy is really a global problem. Still around 3 billion people who continue to rely on open fires and simple stoves to cook their daily meals, resulting, depending on which estimate you believe, in anywhere from 3 to 4 million deaths every year. Also a major contributor to black carbon with climate benefits, and of course major implications in terms of annual cost to health, environment, and overall development as well. So just to give you an idea, if you think about this, around 3 to 4 million deaths number, any way you look at it, household air pollution is really right up there with the leading risk factors for health on a global scale. So we really do have a public health imperative to accelerate clean and safe cooking. So just to emphasize here for a moment, when we talk about household air pollution, you'll notice that I didn't say indoor air pollution, what people used to say historically, but this is because we realize now that this really kind of complex mix of health damaging and climate damaging pollutants that occur as a result of traditional cooking results in pollution inside the home, but also, as you can see here from the photo on the bottom, substantial pollution that also doesn't just stay indoors, but is released into the outdoor environment. And in fact, what we know is that household air pollution emissions are actually a major source of ambient or outdoor air pollution, particularly in places like India and China, which have major air pollution issues, as you know. And so this is really important to note because we simply won't be able to achieve any of our air quality goals without addressing household air pollution. Can contribute up to a third of pollution, particularly in winter months in both India and China. And of course, these are the areas that have the biggest problems to begin with. So the key challenge that we have as we think about this is how we can actually demonstrate that adoption of clean cooking can really save lives. And this is, of course, quite a complicated issue, as you can imagine. You have to think not only about household air pollution occurring from a single cooking technology, but also the continued use of other cooking technologies in the home, other combustion sources, fuel characteristics, the ambient air pollution issue, as I mentioned, because, of course, even if one household has the cleanest possible cooking stoves and fuels, if everybody around them continues to cook with traditional fires, that's going to dampen any effects that they might otherwise achieve. Of course, very important issues of access, affordability, user preferences as well. And I think really to note and kind of related to the topic of our webinar today, I think it's really exciting that we now have a lot more clarity in terms of what we mean when we're thinking about different stove and fuel technologies. You know, what is green for the environment may not necessarily be clean for health. And we're really pleased that with the development of the international standards process, as well as the WHO air quality guidelines, which are really health-based, we have much more information on the extent to which different technologies will offer benefits to the environment and climate, or also offer benefits in terms of health. And we really are quite clear now that it's really those technologies and fuels that are at tier 4 or above for indoor emissions that are likely to achieve the maximum health benefits. So if health is what you're most interested in, then that's really where you need to aim. But again, there are a lot of other benefits that you can see as a result of kind of improved cooking overall. So just to pause in terms of the clean cooking and health-related issues, I think there's some key questions that we've seen over the years on clean cooking and child survival. We've known for quite a while now that babies who are exposed to household air pollution, on average, they're 90 grams lighter at birth. And if you're wondering, you know, how much is 90 grams, that's about the weight of two medium-sized eggs. And in terms of a child's birth weight and their subsequent health in life, that actually can make a big difference. So we're really interested in seeing how clean cooking can affect adverse pregnancy outcomes like low birth weight or premature birth. In addition, as you can see from this graph here, we've seen major progress with declines in lower respiratory infections and pneumonias in young children over time. Some differences across different regions, lots of progress thanks to vaccination, other preventive measures, different forms of treatment and diagnostics. But what we're really interested in knowing is how addressing household air pollution can really help drop the remaining pool of pneumonia that remains in developing countries. And so I'm very excited to say that we've got now lots of emerging results from randomized controlled trials, which are kind of the gold standard for health research, that are taking place in Ghana, Nepal, and Nigeria. And the emerging results that we see are actually incredibly promising. Most importantly, the women like using clean fuels, and they like to use them near exclusively whenever possible. And when they can do this, we can actually see drastic reductions in exposure to air pollution. What we also see, which is very promising, is emerging evidence on the health benefits, which are also trending in the right direction. We're seeing differences in children's lung function even at 1 month of age, and further reductions in pneumonia observed even in areas where vaccines have already been taken to scale. Now, beyond children's health, I just also wanted to flag that household air pollution is a leading risk factor for non-communicable diseases, so really the chronic respiratory and cardiovascular disease among the poor in developing countries. And this is really critical because this is the one major risk factor that is virtually shared by everybody in the bottom 3 billion. These are people who don't have any of the traditional risk factors that we think of in terms of chronic disease. The vast majority are non-smoking, they don't abuse alcohol, they're physically active, and they're certainly not overnourished. And in addition, the babies that are born at low birth weight are also at an increased risk of developing NCDs. So the challenge here is really to think about what we can do. We don't want to have to wait another 20 or 30 years to follow up people who are just now shifting to clean stoves and fuels at birth, but really to get a better understanding of how long it takes before you start to see risk reversal. So very similar to what you might see with smoking cessation, we're really interesting, and there's work underway to see what are the right biomarkers and indicators to really evaluate over a short time frame. And there are several studies that are currently underway that are going to help inform this. Now, I think the other really exciting momentum that we see for our sector is really the fact that we are having increased awareness within our sector and also globally that clean cooking is really integral to achieving many global goals. So 10 of the global goals. We've focused a bit more on health just to start here, but there are a lot of other benefits that you can see as a result of clean cooking. I've highlighted all 10 of them here. Everything from poverty, hunger, education, gender equality, affordable and clean energy, economic growth, sustainability, climate, and then even, contribution to environmental degradation as well. And it's really exciting to have one set or class of interventions that really can help to impact the range of global goals that we'd all like to see achieved. What this means, of course, is that it's really a priority to have complementary partnerships with the markets and enterprise sides of things in order to really accelerate access and sustained use. This includes things like pipeline strengthening, the R&D to better meet the cooking needs. I think that you're going to hear a lot about it from our enterprises on the webinar today. Thinking about facilitating financing, increasing production capacity. Also lots of innovation underway to accelerate distribution, whether it's smaller cylinders, portable stations, pay-as-you-go, other types of innovations that are really focused on the distribution, and of course really important to expand access and affordability at the base of the pyramid. We're seeing lots of interesting kind of momentum in India, in Nigeria, as well as in China at the national level to really help focus on this key issue. And of course, underlying all of this is going to be the importance of really promoting evidence-based advocacy to make the case for why it's so important to accelerate clean and safe cooking. Just to give you one example of how some of this work is being done, one of our partners, the Gold Standard Foundation, of course, as they're thinking about being able to help accelerate the global goals, they've been developing efforts that are really focused on results-based financing for clean cooking that really focuses on being able to accelerate a range of benefits, so benefits to health, to climate, to environment, and also looking at some social benefits as well. So just an example here, they have developed a methodology, for example, in addition to their traditional carbon market technology, to really look at how you can look at changes in exposure to air pollution and translate that into avoidable disability-adjusted life years, or the amount of time that people spend either sick or that they kind of lose because of premature mortality. And so I think the real key challenge that we have here now is to make sure that the health sector will also be as excited about accepting exposure reductions as adequate verification for these benefits. Just to wrap up here, because I really want to hear the discussion from the other presenters here as well, it's really going to be a priority moving forward that we can continue to mainstream clean cooking to support a range of development and climate outcomes, whether we're focusing on public health, to really integrate clean cooking, as I mentioned earlier, into other opportunities to address child survival, to address the ambient air pollution issue, looking at climate and environment with support of REDD+ goals, the different NDCs, NAMAs, JEF, other mitigation goals, really focusing on social and economic inclusion. I think it's going to be really critical to make sure that people have a better idea of just the extent and the magnitude to which this whole burden of unpaid care work can really impact women's full empowerment, their potential, and then national economic growth as a result. And of course, we'll need to continue to focus our efforts in IDP and humanitarian settings so that we can really have some demonstration projects underway to reduce gender-based violence, enhance women's empowerment, and really make sure that technologies that are scaled up in humanitarian settings are really technologies that will provide the range of co-benefits that we're all interested in. All of these are going to require strong interdisciplinary partnerships with key implementation agencies as well as the enterprises and active buy-in from national government. So I think that with the development goals, what a very interesting kind of crossroads to really be able to make sure that we can accelerate not only clean cooking, but all the benefits that we'd like to see associated with it.
Thanks so much, Sumi. Thank you. That's really excellent, and I think that's a great way to get us started by giving us kind of this big picture view of kind of the global view, including research, including the private sector, and including people working on health, especially on that topic specifically, and bringing them in. And also just how important it can be to women. And so I think in some of our past webinars we touch on that. We did have a webinar focusing on humanitarian aid situations and displaced people in March. I can share that link with you all because we did focus quite a lot on clean cook stoves in that one as well. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and go straight into the presentation of Ron Bills. Hi Ron, how are you doing?
Hi Molly, how are you?
Great. Let's see, we just need to get that full screen. It's almost there.
All right.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you for joining us here today. We're really curious to hear kind of our first perspective from the private sector, from EnviroFit, and from the chairman and CEO of EnviroFit. So thanks for joining us here today, and I will let you go ahead and go directly into your presentation.
Hey, fantastic. Well, hey, thanks, and glad to be here. But first, let me set the stage a little bit about EnviroFit, as I can get this. We're a global organization, so to kind of set the stage, we have operations in East Africa, West Africa, Latin America. Specifically, we have a headquarters in Nairobi, and a manufacturing facility. We also have a assembly operations in Lagos and Accra in Africa. Our first business unit was India, so we're also in Pan-India, which services Nepal and Myanmar and those regions. And then in Central America, we have a factory in Mexico City, as well as in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and operations in Guatemala, and Lima, Peru. So our headquarters is in Colorado. So to give you an idea of scale, we did about $26 million in business last year across the world, and this year we're on target to do a little over 30 million. So fairly large, I'd say medium-sized enterprise. Our focus is on reducing energy poverty and transitioning people from energy poverty. It's a big problem, as Sumi said. There's 4.3. Probably most of you have heard these statistics, but 4.3 million deaths. More deaths than malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV combined. So it's a huge problem.
Hey Ron, sorry to interrupt you there. A few people are having a little trouble hearing you. I hear you pretty well. Do you think you could move just a little closer to your microphone? Or if you have a headset? Oh, perfect. I think that's much better.
Is that better?
Oh, much, much better. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sorry. So 4.3 million deaths, more deaths than HIV, malaria, tuberculosis combined. Most of you have heard those statistics. Smart cooking, which is what we call it, smarter living, EnviroFit. But a clean cook stove can have a lot of benefits to a family. Save a lot of money, $300. 60% reduction in fuel, 80% reduction in toxic emissions, 50% savings in time, which is a big deal, where you can use that time to do other productive things for the family and income generation or child care or whatever the case may be, personal case may be. And a 50% reduction in the risk of pneumonia. So we focus on designing a line of stoves. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, one stove need. There's different cooking habits in different parts of the world, different pots, different cultures. So, but we have some core elements around our smart stoves, and that's durable, strong, affordable, efficient, and aspirational, desired, which I think is a key element that we'll get into in more detail. But we have a line of stoves, from wood stoves, charcoal stoves, commercial stoves, more professional grade. The one on the left there is a Smart Saver Pro. or a Super Saver Pro 100, that's a 100-liter pot. So that's a huge amount. That's for schools, hospitals, larger institutional cooking. But the main thing I want to talk today about is our business model around driving behavioral change. Because those that have been involved in Cookstoves realize that it's not easy. It's the customer's tough. And one of the things that we have to overcome is driving that behavioral change. There's a lot of cultural implications around how traditionally things have been cooked, and the transition from either fuels or stoves is hard. And one of the things that we focus on is customer service. And you begin to wonder why customer service. But when you think about all the things in your life that drive change, my biggest decision today is whether I'm going to go to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee. But to a lot of people, half the world had to get up and light a fire today to cook with. And so, when you think about that Starbucks, what drives people to want to buy a Starbucks? It's the consistency of the brand message, it's the consistency of the customer service. You know what you're going to get, and you believe and trust that brand. And that can hold true, whether you're talking your favorite restaurant, your favorite hotel, but that customer service at the top of this pyramid is paramount to driving behavioral change and brand loyalty. And when you look at customer service and sales and marketing and supply and production and R&D, a lot of times, when we talk about people living in energy poverty, we forget about customer service. In a lot of cases, we forget that they're customers. And I think that's a real key point around driving change. I mean, to us, those are our customers, and we care about our customers. We listen to our customers. We do focus groups with our customers. We want to learn everything we can about a customer to improve our products and improve our business model. And I would argue that in a lot of cases, people not only forget about the customer service, but past the research and design and maybe production, we forget about really caring about that customer. And when you look at the markets we work in and our customers, there isn't a lot of branded product past the consumables. When you get to a durable like a stove, there isn't a lot of branded product. And why is that? I think when you look at traditionally, a lot of there's been a lot of interventions and driven by recipients, by giveaway, by recipient programs, aid-based organizations. And what that does is it drives a culture of, what's the lowest possible cost that I can buy as many as I can for, versus high quality, does it work? And it drives a culture of telling people what they need versus asking people what they want. And there's a big difference, especially if you want sustainable change and long-lasting businesses and behavioral change. So asking people what they want, doing focus groups, really dialing in the product to what people really want to aspire to own is key. When you look at sub-Saharan Africa, which has the highest population of youth in the world, highest cell phone penetrations, it's amazing that Africa will essentially double in size by the year 2050, from just under 1 billion people to almost 2 billion people estimated. So obviously something has to be done around renewable resources and clean cooking to be able to drive that. It just can't sustain itself. So how do we drive change? Through customer service. When you look at creation of happy customers, what does that really take? It takes delivering products people really want to own and aspire to have. and building a brand and building loyalty, building trust. All of those things are key elements to driving that change. This is a semi-load of products being delivered, but you know, when you come back to that quality versus quantity, I think it's very important that we create a culture of quality. I see so many cases where products are dumped into developing economies that really don't work. And I don't know how many of you out there, but yeah, I know it really frustrates me if I buy something and weeks or days later it breaks or doesn't work. And in a culture where you really don't have a store to take it back to, that's a big problem. When you, especially at these income levels, when you've invested a lot of money in something, it's very important that it work and be durable and last and build the brand and build that loyalty. We spend a lot of time around focus groups and understanding the customer and what are their challenges in the day-to-day lives. We also spend a lot of time in an R&D lab developing product. This is a plancha stove that for Latin America that during its development phase we're cooking tortillas because that's the main staple and that's the main cooking need of the stove in the areas where we're working. So this understanding of the customer is very, very important to driving that behavioral change, because it's just like anything in the world. If you want to, if you aspire to own something, it has benefits in your life, and we want to make sure that our products have benefits in people's lives, whether they're our forced gas stoves or charcoal stoves or wood stoves, whichever they may be. And that durability testing in both the lab and field is very, very important to make sure that products last. If you know, when you deliver products that people want, you'll have a line of people to buy them. But if they don't deliver that value, you won't. Understanding the cooking needs, the cooking habits, the people's behavior, that's all key. And then building that trust with the brand and standing behind that brand. When we first started offering warranties, people couldn't believe that, because a warranty was something that really culturally wasn't in the markets that we worked in. But we wanted to prove that our products are durable, they last, they're good quality. Just a few pictures in the markets that we deal in, and some of the product choices out there that really don't work. So this, you know, cost-driven behavior is another key element around changing thoughts. I mean, yeah, a clean technology cook stove, a good quality clean technology cook stove is more expensive than maybe some of the traditional non-clean cook stoves. And so building that trust and that belief in the brand and the willingness to spend more for something that lasts versus spending less for something that doesn't can be a cultural change. Trust is the key element there. So it takes a lot of work, you know, teams branded, building this line of trust and communications and building relationships and with every customer that we have. And that really drove us to some thinking around call centers and customer care centers, what we call 360 customer care. And then we're also launching a new LPG product line with a smart gas valve that goes on top of an LPG tank that would allow pay-as-you-go, pay-as-you-cook methodologies around LPG purchases.
Hey, Ron.
This is
Is it okay if I jump in now to go to the next speaker? But we could always come back to some of these slides maybe during the Q&A, and I think it's a really good place to stop on the pay-as-you-cook idea, because I think that's very interesting. I think we'll have some questions about that from the audience.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And we're just wrapping up here.
Oh,
There's
perfect.
a call, and there's customer care group, and these are just some pictures, and that's our team in Honduras,
Wonderful. Wow.
and that's it.
Great.
So thank you very much.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for this emphasis on customer care, yeah, absolutely on really also on the job creations part. I think we'll come back to that in the Q&A with everyone. So wonderful. So I am going to move over to Ruben Walker now. Ruben, are you there? So Ruben is the co-founder and commercial director for African Clean Energy. Hi, Ruben. Welcome.
Hi, Molly. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you. So I understand we're probably going to start out with a video from you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Or do you want to start off talking? Either way.
Well, I think the video will give a nice little grounding, and then I can give a little bit of information about who we are and what we do, and take a couple of questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, that sounds great. And on that note, let me just remind the audience, keep on sending in your questions. Send in the questions that you might have had as you're thinking about it. For Sumi Mehta from the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves, for Ron Bills from EnviroFit, and now let's watch the video from Ruben. This is from African Clean Energy, and
the body is made of stainless steel, the base is steel, the top is steel. You know, it's made of very, very durable material. We've got what's a lithium ferrophosphate battery in there, which is rated to do 1,500 to 2,000 cycles, which if you're doing cooking only, literally gives you decades worth of lifetime. If you're using it to charge a mobile phone every day, you're running lights, then you're going to get at least 5 or 6 years out of it. And then, you know, at that point you can replace the battery and possibly upgrade it and keep going. We manufacture this in our own factory in Lesotho in Southern Africa, where we also have a substantial distribution team. Growth is pretty good. Our top sales team, so it's a two-person team, just sold 235 units in 1 month. So for a single team, that's a record so far. We also have distribution in Cambodia and in Uganda. What's interesting is when you supply both clean thermal energy and electricity, you get all kinds of extra options for development, as in households can start switching to a smartphone, for instance, which offers huge new opportunity for offering a platform for general poverty alleviation. Yeah, on that note, I thought maybe if there are any questions, I'd take some questions, and if not, I'd have to excuse myself because I have another call coming up. So Molly, I don't know if have any questions come in?
there are some questions. Let's see. Let me see. One person is asking here about the cost for wholesalers and what the retail price would be. I mean, this is probably a question that we'll come back to for everyone, but yeah, about how much are people paying roughly for this? Because it sounds like they're being sold quite quickly, so it must be something people are finding affordable, but yet it's still profitable. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, sure. So generally they retail for somewhere between 100 and 130 US dollars, depending on the market. Now, almost nobody in our sector can actually afford that outright. However, most of our customers, particularly in Lesotho, really are in the sort of $2 a day category. And the model that we've implemented is that people put a down payment of roughly 20% down, and then they pay the rest off over a period of, in Lesotho, 9 months. In Cambodia, we're looking at 12 months. And what you see then is that when you take the savings, so you're going to get, on the cooking fuel, you're going to get at least 50%, but in some cases up to 80, 85%, depending on what the baseline of energy consumption was. So paraffin for lighting gets completely eliminated, candles get eliminated, mobile phone charging, which can run anywhere from 10 US cents per charge to, in some cases, 50 cents to $1, plus hours of walking to the next village. So you eliminate that completely. Disposable batteries for things like radios, eliminate that completely. So you're coming to very, very significant savings, and our data shows in Lesotho that even in this segment of the population, our customers currently spend somewhere between 15 and 25 US dollars a month on energy. So if you can then allow it to be paid off over a period of 9 months, then the savings more than offset the cost of the stove, and that's what's working in our favor. Additionally, I mean, in terms of sales to the consumer, the product itself, you have to imagine it puts out somewhere between 5.5 and 6 kilowatts at full power, which means that it's extremely quick, very powerful, and I have genuinely never attended a demonstration meeting where any of our audience members were not impressed by the product. So that's a great way to come in, and then our philosophy is you make a product that everybody wants, and then you see how we can make it affordable for people. But because particularly thermal energy is so fundamental to people's current time and money expenses, monthly expenses, it is the perfect product to go just a little bit further. And I agree with Ron. It is you make a quality product and you treat your customer like a customer. And that thermal energy is the area where we should not try and make a cheap product for people because they are poor. We should make a good product because it can pay for itself if you go the extra mile and you set up a quality financial product alongside it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I really love to hear in both your presentation and in Ron's, about the customer element of it, and really looking at it as you would any type of marketing, really, but as well with shall I say, an option for the poor, so that it is an affordable technology as well, and that we had several questions actually about consumer financing. So, I mean, I'm glad you answered that question. And also just a really basic question here, from the video, what is the fuel that you're using for the cooking application?
Right, so the exciting thing is that this is a multi-fuel biomass stove, and multi-fuel is extremely important because if you've got anything that's not a multi-fuel stove, then you're tying yourself to a fuel supply alongside your stove supply. And for small companies in this sector, it is simply not possible to set up a 100% reliable production and distribution system for fuels. So, that's why if there is charcoal available in the market, I mean, despite the fact that that's a fuel that's quite damaging to produce, it can consume that. It can consume firewood. It can consume agricultural wastes like corn cobs, like various shells, coconuts, and of course processed biomass like wood pellets, briquettes. So it's whatever people have right now, they can burn extremely efficiently inside the stove. But we also want to switch them to a renewable, clean, processed biomass fuel. So if we can sell them a wood pellet, perfect, then we will. But we don't want to have the entire business model rely on a 100% reliable supply of that fuel, because that brings a lot of risks. And as soon as customers spend a lot of money on your product and are then reliant on your fuel and you fail them, you're going to have a lot of very, very angry and disappointed customers, and you're going to make it harder to convince those people to stick to a clean cooking.
Mm-hmm. And just with maybe one last minute, I think this is a very important question that just came in. So since we were talking about customers, could you talk a little bit more about kind of the gendered nature of the stove's customer base? Is it mainly women who are selling to women? Are your customers primarily women, and are there very many women or female-headed households? And how does that impact on kind of that access to finance for the for the down payment, 20% down payment? So can you give us just a quick perspective on your customer base? How many are women, and how do you work with them? Mm-hmm.
So in Lesotho, where we do the majority of our data collection, the percentage of women floats somewhere between 75 and 85%. So you can say that there is a definite skew towards female customers. Funnily enough, anecdotally, I often note that when we do demonstrations, that the potential customers that seem to show the most excitement are sometimes also men, which can have to do with the fact that the mobile phone that everyone has and nobody can charge at home can suddenly be charged. So that's an element that can kind of bring a lot of unity in the desire for the product, which I think is very important for our sales dynamics. But in the end, it tends to be women that do purchase it.
And one last question. This is purely a clarification question. Can you repeat the power output? Did you say that's 6 kilowatts? And another question was, is that 500 watts per hour for 12 hours or 6 kilowatts output? Let me know if that's not totally clear. It's two questions, but from the same person.
I think we shouldn't mix the electricity and the firepower. So the firepower comes from the biomass burning. And that high power, yeah, it can put out somewhere between 5.5 and 6 kilowatts of firepower. So that essentially means that you can be boiling a liter of water in well under 4 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's very powerful, and that's one of its main selling points. Is just how people get extremely excited by the fact that their cooking process is it cut down hugely in time. Mm-hmm. And then there's the amount of time that the battery lasts. So the battery will have the battery is a 5 amp hour 6.4 volt, and if fully charged it should give you somewhere between 20 and 25, sometimes 30 hours of cooking time, obviously depending on whether you cook on high power or low power. That is reduced if you are also charging a mobile phone at the same time or using the light.
Okay, well that's great. Ruben, maybe we will just stop there. There was a follow-up question. If you have a look at your questions, you can reply by text. That's to one of our listeners who had some further kind of technical questions. Or we can also follow up post-webinar by email, because I know you've got to run. But thank you so much. That was really great, and kind of a little different format for us today, and I think that went pretty well actually. So maybe we'll change it up another time in the future. Thanks a lot, Ruben, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Molly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well,
Bye-bye.
Great. Bye-bye. Bye. Well, great. So what we're going to do now is go directly over to Mike Clifford. Mike, hi. Are you there on the line? We had just a little change in the order of our panel today. Let me just see if he's there, and I'll go ahead and ask him to share his screen. All right, perfect.
Right.
Sorry, I had
better.
inadvertently muted you, Mike, so I promise I'm not trying to abuse my power of muting people and unmuting. So wonderful. I'm just going to ask you to share your screen here. I hope this is okay for you to just change the order a little bit, and we'll have Simon Batchelor go last today. Great. Well, wonderful. That is full screen for me, and I will let you launch directly into your presentation with no further ado.
Great, thanks very much. Good to hear the presentation so far on. We were given this title for the webinar of what's next for clean cook stoves, and so I thought I'd steal it because it's a nice title. I think it might be worth looking backwards a little bit before we think about the future. And we've come a long way in the stove community over the last 40, 50, 60 years maybe, starting with well, I'm going to start with the 1970s, really, Schumacher and the whole appropriate technology movement. And the focus there was really about making stoves that were fit for use by consumers. So actually there was some of this kind of consumer care thing in the early days. And then we moved to this improved cook stove phase, where there was a focus on improving efficiency. And now we seem to have clean stoves. Clean is an interesting word. If you say the opposite, if you call someone's cooking dirty, then that's quite a nasty thing to say about people, quite pejorative. So the clean phrase, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it because, if you're saying, well, if your cooking isn't clean, is your cooking dirty instead? We seem to have moved on a little bit, or at least people seem to want to move to, rather than talking about the stoves, to talking about clean fuels. And, there's a little bit of discussion about whether biomass is a fuel that we should be promoting or not. I think the only agreement seems to be that kerosene and coal are not fuels that should be going forwards, but otherwise the jury is out, I think. And then we had today the Ron from EnviroFit talking about smart stoves. So we have maybe modern, smart, and who knows where we're going with this terminology. I also thought it might be worth stepping back a little bit and saying, well, what's so bad about cooking in the old-fashioned way, if you like, on traditional wood stoves? We've had a little bit of mention there from Sumi about the time spent collecting fuel or the risk to women going into the bush to collect firewood. More sort of in the 1970s, there was arguments around deforestation, with the cooking being blamed for degradation of forests and so on, and I'm going to talk about these in the next few slides in more details. Again, Sumi was talking about the health impacts of stoves, and I noticed the email that came around advertising this webinar said 1.9 million deaths, then we had 3 million deaths, now we're saying 4 million deaths a year through household air pollution. CO2 emissions, or black carbon emissions, are also a more recent focus there because they're thought to exacerbate climate change. I thought it might also be nice to flip this question the other way around. This is kind of what academics do, and say, well, what's not so bad about cooking on traditional stoves? Well, apart from the risks of collecting fuel, we could actually say that collecting fuel can be a valuable community activity, particularly for women who are restricted to the household and under sort of patriarchal systems where their movements are very limited. And I don't really buy this argument that women shouldn't be collecting firewood because of the risk of attack. I think that the problem there is the men hiding in the bushes, not the women collecting fuel, and that it's the men hiding in the bushes that should be dealt with rather than preventing women from going about their daily business. Wood is a sustainable free fuel, nice and environmentally friendly. Again, it's slightly strange that in the West we're trying to get off fossil fuels, whereas we seem to be seeing them as the solution for the developing world sometimes. It's culturally appropriate, and it's also adaptable and flexible. On the bottom right there, you can see a 3-stone fire, and if you have more guests coming for dinner, then you move your stones a little bit further apart, and you can fit your bigger pot there to cook for the extended family, or you can push them closer together if you're only using a small pot. And you can't really do that with any of the stoves that we're trying to introduce. I want to talk a little bit about deforestation. It was one of the main drivers around improved stoves in the 1970s, until a bunch of pesky academics came along and started doing research and found that firewood consumption is not often a driver of large-scale deforestation. Sure, you can find areas where it's a problem, particularly around large urbanized dwellings, or where there's been an influx of refugees into a community, but generally cooking your dinner on wood is not a major cause of deforestation. Charcoal production is another activity that's not very good for forests, but it's more about forest degradation rather than actually sort of completely eliminating tree cover. And so I'll talk later on about the idea of managing and integrating forest management into stove programs. Health, again, it was interesting to hear the ongoing studies from Ghana and Nepal that are underway, and results sort of starting to come in. But we have a big study that's already been conducted in Malawi, the CAP study, which made the news, which I'm surprised hasn't been mentioned, because it's the largest sort of double-blind trial that's been in existence to look at specifically the health impact of cooking on biomass stoves and improved stoves. It made the headlines because the national news and international news agencies picked up that actually the results of the study were that the stove that you cooked your dinner on made no difference to the incidence of pneumonia in children under the age of 5, which was a bit of a surprise. And it was also a surprise to Kevin Mortimer. I don't know whether he's in the audience today, but he's quoted here as saying, well, I'd really love to have seen that changing the stoves here was made a clear beneficial intervention for children under the age of 5, but unfortunately the evidence suggests that it didn't make any difference. And there was a bit of a storm around this, and GAC put out some press releases, and it's strange that the release from GAC said that based on the type of stove evaluated in the trial, the lack of impact on child pneumonia was not surprising. Well, it was a surprise to the principal investigator in the project, and instead they seem to want to change the focus to talking about burns instead, which is I think really dodging the issue. Academics deal with real data. We're kind of technology neutral. We want to look at the real benefits of these stoves, and we want to tell it as it is, not just how we'd like it to be. Talking a little bit more detail about health and stoves, here's a plot of the relative risk of having a lower respiratory infection in childhood against the sort of exposure levels in PM 2.5, those small particulates, in terms of micrograms per cubic meter. And I'm going to put there on the World Health Organization's safe guidelines, that's for long-term and sort of peak exposure, which are around 10, 25 parts per million. But then if you put on the sort of stoves that we've been talking about, the open fires clearly are off the scale there on the right-hand side. But even if you get to a very kind of clean or modern or improved cook stove, you're still experiencing levels of PM 2.5 exposure that are orders of magnitude higher than the WHO air quality guidelines. So, you know, what are the health impacts of switching stoves? Well, sadly, often they're not demonstrable at all. I sometimes compare this to a smoker that might be smoking 40 cigarettes a day and says, well, I'm going to cut down to 10 or maybe 20 cigarettes a day, and then really not going to show any change in their health outcomes unless they cut out smoking completely. And that's exceedingly difficult to do if you're cooking, and particularly if you're cooking food as well, because in the cooking process, particles are given off depending on the food that you're cooking and the cooking process that you're using there as well, no matter what your fuel type. Moving on to climate change, some quote here from the Forestry Commission that says burning wood is largely carbon neutral. As long as you plant as many trees as you cut down, or more trees than you cut down, then it's actually quite beneficial for the environment here there. We have to qualify that a little bit when we come to charcoal production and thinking about transporting fuels to the city areas. You can see the overloaded vehicle there is certainly not a carbon neutral vehicle at all. So let's go back to that slide where I said, well, what's the issue with what problems are we looking at with clean cooking stoves? What are we hoping to see them solving? Well, I've talked a little bit about this idea of collecting fuel. Evidence has showed that actually if you give people improved stoves, sometimes they collect just as much fuel as they used to and spend just as much time collecting fuel, and they sell the excess. So it's not really reducing the time of collection. It might be providing an additional income source though. Deforestation, well, the evidence is there that doesn't really put the blame on cooking for deforestation. Indoor air pollution I've talked a little bit about. We don't really see gains from changing cooking technologies that will do anything to impact these 3-4 million deaths a year. CO2 emissions I've talked about. But maybe the key here is at the bottom here, and Ron from EnviroFit kind of hinted at this as well, that it's about the consumer. And these cook stoves no doubt make cooking just a little bit easier for people. And I'm a believer in improved cook stoves. I've actually been lighting one this morning and testing one out in the labs. And this is, the benefits that people on the ground want to see. They want to cook their dinner in a little bit more of an easy way. But is that the sort of benefit that's going to open the wallets of the sort of international donor community? Probably not. So we're asked, what should we do next? Well, here's what we shouldn't do next. This is, of course, a YAC, which stands for yet another cook stove. And here's a cartoon of an improved cook stove here. This one's a fantastic stove. It's not quite on the market yet, but it charges your phone, it chops your food, it lights, it's got a light, it will read stories to your children, it will pound your maize as well. It's even got a built-in juicer and comes with a radio as well. And I think sometimes we're making stoves very, very technologically advanced and complicated, and we're maybe overthinking the technology angle of this. So what should we do next instead? I think we need to take a holistic approach and get away from just talking about cook stoves. We need to talk about forest management. If we can do that effectively and partner with organizations like Green Pop here, logo on the right hand side, then we can actually have people using fuel in a sustainable way, and we can say that cooking on wood could be the fuel of the future, not a sort of dirty fuel of the past. We need to think about fuel production when it comes to things like charcoal. Efficient charcoal kilns are an area that has really had very limited research and development in there. If we could generate charcoal using agricultural waste, we would solve a number of problems and provide people with an appropriate fuel. And I know there's been a little bit about that in Ghana, turning sewage into charcoal, for example. We need to think about how the fuel gets to the stove. Right-hand picture there is from Addis Ababa, showing some donkeys carrying some firewood and some women really overloaded with wood as well, taking it down into the city to sell. We need to think about the manufacture of stoves. We need to think about the whole infrastructure around that, including the finance as well that's been mentioned. What about technologies that go on the stove, pots and pans? You know, pressure cookers would save a lot of energy. If that's what we're about, saving fuel, then again, that seems to be an area that's not really promoted very well. And it might not work for certain foods where you have to stir them during the cooking, but I'm sure it would work for some of the foods we're seeing that are cooked on these stoves. When you think about the social cultural aspects, the household dynamics that go on, we need to think about food, and that's something that's really lacking in the argument here as well, in the discussion. We talk about stoves as if they're some artifact and we're not really sure what they're used for, but we need to get back to realizing that a stove is about putting food on the table and feeding a family. And we need to think about waste as well. In communities that have got no waste disposal service, if they're burning waste, then they're going to be generating more pollution from burning plastics and burning waste than they do actually from burning biomass on a cook stove, whether it's a traditional one or an improved one. And that's all I've got for you.
Well, that's great, Mike. I think we're going to have a good discussion in the Q&A with your presentation there. And I think, yeah, thank you very much for bringing up all of these other sorts of issues or raising some questions. I mean, we can debate them as well, and we've already had some questions and some comments come in, for example, on caps, and we'll get to those in the Q&A. We do see those, and Mike, you should be able to read those as well. So thank you so much. We're going to move directly over to Simon Batchelor now. Hi, Simon. Are you there?
Hi. Yes. Have you unlocked my microphone? Yes, you have.
I have indeed, yeah, and I sent you a request. It should be a pop-up on your screen to allow you to share.
Yeah.
Great.
Can you see my screen?
I can indeed, and if you can just make it full screen. Perfect. Wonderful. So without further ado as well, and thank you everybody for staying with us. Please stay with us just a little bit longer and we will get to your questions in the Q&A, and please keep those questions coming in. Thank you, Simon. I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Thank you. I think it's been really interesting so far, and I would like to come at it from a slightly different angle. So, I mean, I think that it's interesting. Everybody said, is it 1.5 million, 3 million? I had put in my in my PowerPoint several million, because it does keep changing. And I think we have very clearly seen the scandal of biomass emissions on public health, as very much demonstrated by Sumi. And Mike and others have talked about the various developments over the years on improved cook stoves. And I would draw attention to the ESMAP GAC report that just says the business as usual scenario is encouraging, but is going to fall far short of the potential. And so what I'd like to suggest is a completely different approach. Let's actually look at some opportunities that are arising. They may not be here just yet, but they're definitely on the way. So for us, we noticed first back in 2013, solar panel prices had been coming down. My own personal journey was that I was very much into renewable energy in the 80s, and I got variously distracted in social mobilization and in telecoms, and I kind of came back to renewable energy somewhere around 2012, 2013. So whereas I had in my mind $10 per kilowatt, I suddenly found out that it was 50 cents per kilowatt ex-factory. But more importantly, we have lithium-ion batteries coming down in price. All this work on electric vehicles is really pushing the price down, and it's predicted due to learning and mass production to come down even further. And of course, we all know that charcoal prices are rising. So that just started us with a relatively naive question: is it now time to start cooking with solar photovoltaics? We've had solar cookers, and that requires a lot of behavioral change from people. It has some success in some small countries, in a small way in some countries. But this was about, can we actually just charge a battery and then use that battery to cook? And in our early investigations, we seem to discover that 1.2 billion pay about $12 a month in real money. All that charcoal that Mike showed going into the middle of Addis is purchased, and those people are then cooking it in their homes in an urban setting. So we wondered whether it was cheap enough to use a solar PV array to cook with, and the answer is no. At 2015, 2016, it's not yet cheap enough. But if those graphs carry on trend, by 2020 it will, and that includes profit margins. When we suggested that to other people, one of the people, DFID, turned around and commissioned an economic modelling exercise by the University of Surrey with Leach and Aduro, and they showed that indeed it's of the same order. If you've got a price range of charcoal, the methodology they took in simple terms was to take the energy delivered at the pot. So that whole range of improved cook stoves we know has a whole range of efficiencies, and so too does LPG, and they looked at a range of efficiencies, pessimistic and optimistic, and then compared it with the PV solar home system with various discount rates and various profit margins. And what this graph shows is that it's of the same order, that by 2020 in some markets PV solar home system would be cheaper than purchasing charcoal or purchasing LPG. But actually Africa is very strongly urbanizing, so we're not talking about the situation where people collect the firewood from the local forest. I mean, Mike has just made a call for actually, you know, managing the forests and looking at the whole system, and in some rural areas that will be the most appropriate thing to do. But I think it was Ron who threw in, or maybe it was Ruben, who threw in that Africa is growing very quickly, and particularly it's urbanizing very quickly. And even within urban settings, people are still using biomass. So why don't they use electricity? Well, there are several reasons. One of them has been that the peak demand often exceeds the capacity. So the daily load curve is for Kenya in 2011, and then you just get those sorts of wiring situations where if you tried to draw the electricity for a 1 kilowatt cooker, you would just burn out your wiring. And then also we know that there's load shedding, blackouts. You can't rely on the electricity being there all the time. And then we realized that the battery solves 90% of those particular problems. You can trickle charge a battery during the night, and then your battery would allow you to cook whenever you wanted to at that peak time. And we kind of felt over the last few years that this is a direction that the world is seeing generally at the sort of top level. You have the Tesla Powerwall, and Mercedes are in there, and there's a group called Powervolt. They're all looking at making relatively fancy domestic battery storage to maximize the use of solar PVs that are connected to the grid and feeding into with a feed-in tariff. but it sets the precedence really that actually you could have a much simpler system with just a simpler battery, and that would enable you to manage electricity more effectively. So of course there is also the massive momentum for SDG 7. I think it was Sumi who pointed out all the other SDGs, that if we could get to tier 4 clean cooking, that it would also minimize drudgery. It would help things to become faster. I think it was Ruben who said it was about speed of cooking, all these sorts of things. But what for me was interesting was that the SDG 7 includes the word reliable. It's not only got to be that affordable, that $12 a month, but it's got to be reliable so that people can use it when they want it. And again, that will still need a lot of new investment. If we all know the challenges of the electrification processes, access, etc. But this is by introducing cooking, you're actually supporting the electrification process, potentially. And that may have its own quantum leap sort of paradigm shifting effect. Well, what makes it works financially, electrification, and sorry, I lost my flow there, but let's start with this slide. So solar has gained some traction in lighting because it's substituted for an expenditure. It's substituted for kerosene, for candles, for batteries. Ruben also talked about that by adding a light to his system and charging mobile phones, he was talking about a total energy expenditure of the household of $15 to $25. So that's well within our scope. But many people, unlike Ruben, who has added biomass to solar PV, many of the solar PV people are now trying to introduce television and refrigeration because they're low energy consuming appliances. They certainly enhance the quality of life, but they don't substitute for any existing expenditure. So the next big expenditure is the cooking. And what we're suggesting is that that could be repurposed to pay for modern energy infrastructure, thus giving investors better returns. How does that work? Well, this is a mini-grid example from India, actually. And within setting up a mini-grid, you can only go so far in terms of distance. And so you end up being limited to a village, let's say, and the village of 150 households. Now, if they all only charge their phone and use minimal LEDs, then you'll see on the left-hand side of the graph, you have to charge them $3 per kilowatt hour in order to recover your 10-year payback on your mini-grid. And that's why so many people talk about productive use. The only way we can really get mini-grids out there is if we do productive use with the irrigation pump. Then if people are using that much electricity, then the price per kilowatt hour can come down. Well, actually, in the middle of the graph, there's a point that actually if people were using 40 to 50 kilowatt hours to convert the electric to use for cooking, then that would strengthen the whole financial case for mini-grids. Let's take another example. The Turkana wind up in the north of Kenya. That was a 1.1 billion investment by Power Africa, which is mainly USAID. And if we assume a 30% load factor, that's going to deliver about 788 gigawatt hours per annum. Well, if you take Matt Leach's and Oduro's model in their low cook scenario, that would supply about 1.5 million households with cooking, but at a cost of $712 per household. So it's that investment, that sort of level of investment is out there, as long as people are guaranteed of their return. So people have invested in the Turkana wind energy farm because they believe that they will get a return on it. And by introducing cooking, we can translate current household expenditure into a return on new technology. I just want to acknowledge LPG. We were talking, again, I think it was Ron maybe was talking about moving into pay-as-you-go LPG. Yes, all this focus on modern energy can be tackled by LPG in some cases, and we know the India case of swapping, you know, the financial support. But imagine also that swap of financial support could also be put into electrical systems. So where have we got to so far? Well, we're looking at a various family of products. We're not talking about a single thing. Again, somebody, I think it was Mike, said that there are very culturally diverse situations where people want to cook things very differently. So on the left-hand side on the top, you have our Gamos prototype, which is a high-end 1 kilowatt cooker with battery built in for either an urban situation or connecting to solar. And we kind of call that the Apple of the products. And then on the next one in on the middle of the screen, the United International University in Bangladesh has been working on prototypes that are just 300 watts and work much more like slow cookers with high insulation. Insulation is, again, Mike threw it in right at the end about pressure cookers. Pressure cookers and insulation are really interesting because they can reduce your total system energy tremendously. Not so much when you're burning charcoal, because you have to have airflow and it's all going around the outside of your pot or your pan. But as soon as you move to electricity, you can actually use insulation and pressure cooking very effectively. But I acknowledge...
Hi, Simon.
Sorry, am I short?
So sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, we've gone over a fair bit. I think we need to move on to the Q&A, but we can take up quite a lot of this in the Q&A, I think.
Okay.
And you've had quite a few questions come in as well, so we will come back to you for sure. Thank you so much for this presentation. I mean, I think it's just clear that there's so much to talk about here that we're only, you know, in this one webinar. Clearly, we need to do a follow-up to really explore more of these things in depth. So thank you so much, Simon. So my colleague Ed Brown, he's going to give kind of a wrap-up, just a couple minutes wrap-up here before we go into the Q&A to help us just to think through these issues a little bit. So Ed, I think you're there already on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Ed Brown from the Low Carbon Energy for Development Network. We co-organize this every month. So please, Ed, thank you. Let us know your thoughts on today's webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Molly. So no simple task this, pulling together what has been, I think, a very interesting set of presentations, but for quite different perspectives. Now, I'm aware that we have gone over the time that we would normally spend on this, so I don't want to spend very much time on this to enable some more discussion with the questions to the speakers. But while I was listening, I really just kind of picked up a number of key themes that I thought it was worth pulling out. The first is what Simon was talking of as a paradigm shift. And I suppose what I was thinking of in relation to this, and this I think also fits in with what Mike was saying, is where exactly are we in terms of the various challenges behind sustainable energy for all? And I think that what this series of presentations have done is focus onto those aspects that relate to clean cooking, but also to show how they connect into the other challenges facing SE for all. So I think the first thing is really, we do need a step beyond business as usual, that it feels to a certain degree across the discussions around clean cooking that there is a recognition amongst all of the clean cooking community that there needs to be a step change, and that there probably need to be a whole range of different issues looked at. And I think what's been looked at this afternoon has begun to show light on some of those in terms of a whole variety of different perspectives. And I think those perspectives touch on a number of different issues and themes. Firstly is, what exactly do we mean by clean cooking? And I think that's been something that's gone across all of these presentations. Are we talking about clean cooking in terms of health? Are we talking about clean cooking in terms of issues surrounding climate change? And also, what is the connotation attached? I thought Mike's point about the connotation attached to the word of clean cooking was really well put. And the debates that we touched on around the Malawi study vis-a-vis the current GAC studies that are taking place in terms of what evidence we need to be able to judge the degree to which we are promoting truly clean alternatives in that context. The second set of issues that we've touched on here are that a whole host of the issues that we're looking at here are to do with behaviour and changing behaviour. And I think that we need to be quite careful here about what we are talking about, whether we are talking about changing people's behaviour to fit to the way that we think they should act in terms of meeting global targets and objectives, or designing strategies that actually reflect the way in which people live their lives and the way in which people cook, the way the market conditions within in particular circumstances and so on. So I think that issue of behavioural change is really important. The third set of issues are those that focus around the affordability of the various solutions put forward. And I noticed some of the questions coming in while Simon was talking is in terms of what is the affordability in different countries. And I think a lot of the work that's being done around the e-cooking perspective is around how this will be very different in different market contexts. And I think it's really important to emphasize that. But also within specific markets, who will be able to afford access not only to the e-cook suggestions, but also to the higher quality cook stoves that were being presented earlier on. What are the different things being offered to different sections of the market? And the final thing I just wanted to raise is that very little talk this afternoon is, or reference has been made to the role of regulation, the role of government promotion, and the role of different aspects of government. So the question of governance of clean cooking, there's a lot made of governance of electricity systems, but little here about the governance at local and national levels surrounding, for example, the adoption of LPG. So those were the issues that I identified. This question of paradigm shifts, the question of what really we mean by clean cooking, the questions of behavioural change, business models and production chains, which is something we didn't also talk about, and governance and national and more local perspectives of different actors and institutions. So hopefully that pulls something together, Molly.
Thank you so much, Ed. No, thank you. I mean, that's very coherent given given all of the topics that we've had to talk about here today. And there is so much in this. And again, we have to include women and gender and, you know, children and all of these elements into it. So I want to thank everybody for staying with us this long. What I'm going to do now is go straight into the Q&A. We'll do one question per person, so we won't keep you too much longer, but we do want to give everybody just a little chance to answer a couple, one question each, and then we can carry on the rest, hopefully over email or this type of thing, and continue the conversation. So going in the same order that we started in, I'll start with Sumi Mehta from the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves. Sumi, are you there with me? Let's see.
Hello?
Hi, great, perfect, Simi. Great, great. All right, well, wonderful. So now you've had a chance, you were kind of like our overview and, starting out to talk about, the research and what is the research showing so far since you're the leader in this area at the Global Alliance. And I had a question during the course of the webinar and also while I was listening to Mike speak, and we had a couple of questions on the CAP study. And I just wanted to bring that up. And this was something where we had Kevin Mortimer on, who was the principal investigator of that study. We had him on in March in another webinar, so I did send that link to everybody, so in case they're interested to hear from him. But I wanted to hear from the Global Alliance, just on your perspective on that, give you a chance to respond to Mike's presentation, and not to be too provocative, but it's always good when we have some difference of opinion, and then we can discuss it, and hopefully the audience as well, they probably have these same questions on their minds. So it's just, could you give us your perspective on that?
Yes, I think very briefly, and this is something that we have seen. I think all of the issues that we understand as a sector with respect to really making sure that the technology, it's not just about the technology, but it's also about being able to have sustained use and kind of disuse of some of the kind of original technologies that are people using. In the CAP study, I think they started out with the technology, and I think that Mike mentioned that based on what we know from the actual lab-based performance of technology, we actually did not expect that it would be really at that steep end of the curve what would be likely to show maximum health benefits, but we're very curious to see kind of the extent to which it might provide some benefit. I think from the publication that came in on Lancet, unfortunately we weren't able to see the exposure data that was associated. Of course, you won't be able to achieve the health benefits unless the exposures come down all the way. From what we do understand, the stove had, they had some challenges with, I think, problems with maintenance with the stoves, and also pretty low usage reported by the study participants. And so the fact that they didn't see an impact is a function of all of those things put together, and not necessarily a function of the technology alone.
Thank you so much, Sumi. No, that's perfectly clear. And what I'm going to do from there, I did have one quick question for you as well. And I think you might have already responded to this person, but people might be interested in it as well. So the question was about whether the Global Alliance is shifting towards LPG only as the cleanest form of fuel for cook stoves. Are people kind of feeling a shift there? Is there a shift there?
No, I think that if anything, the shift that may be perceived is that I think that the LPG community is seeing that there is a real market for them at the base of the pyramid, where they perhaps did not focus their efforts historically. But as far as the Alliance is concerned, we, and as I said, we're very interested in achieving the range of benefits that you get as a result of clean cooking. And we are technology neutral, but we're not impact neutral. And we're very clear that different technologies and fuels will give different benefits, but even among the lowest emission technologies, LPG is only really one of those technologies that's going to give you the lowest possible exposures if used exclusively. So we're certainly, I would say, if anything, we are expanding our partners to have more inclusivity for the clean fuels, including LPG, but it's not at all kind of a shift over and away from biomass by any means.
Thank you so much for that. And I really like what you said about your technology neutral but not impact neutral. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind going forward. So thank you very much for that, Sumi.
Sure.
Going to our next speaker, Ron Bills. Hi, Ron. Can you just unmute yourself? Actually, okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah. I was muting you as well. Okay, once again, that's my bad. So Ron, kind of going on that LPG question, because it was at the very end of your presentation, but I'm really curious about this pay-as-you-go cooking. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? Because pay-as-you-go, probably people in the audience know this has been a huge, huge game changer, particularly for solar home systems. So what could this do for cooking?
Yeah, sure. Our smart gas system is really meant to make LPG affordable on a daily basis. So a lot of our customers are on a daily economy, meaning they make money, they buy their food, they buy their fuel, they cook, and repeat the process. So to many, buying the capital expenditure for the purchase of a tank and a stove and the gas is an insurmountable obstacle. and then not knowing when the gas is going to run out, having uncertainty about delivery mechanisms, et cetera, or impediment to usage. So having a technology such as our smart gas valve would allow the pay-as-you-cook methodology using mobile money. In other words, you can prepay for the gas you're going to use. That meter counts down, will notify you when you need to purchase more, and allow you to really pay for gas on a daily basis. This can be, in many cases, less expensive than cooking with charcoal on a daily basis. So the idea is around being able to have a GPS located system in a person's home that they could prepay gas using mobile money.
Mm-hmm. And again, it kind of comes back to your point about changing customer behavior, because in a lot of places, mobile money is not used, I mean, including North America and Europe, but this is something that's really taken off, particularly in East Africa. Do you think mobile money is going to take off in the other regions where you're working? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, we're currently doing pilots in Ghana and Kenya. And there's mobile money across, in many places. This technology is not limited to mobile money. It could also be used with what is traditional scratch cards and codes as well. But it does have a SIM card enabled and could use mobile money to pay for the transfer.
That's great. Well, thank you for elaborating on that. So I will move to our next speaker. So our next speaker was Ruben, but Ruben has left now because he had to leave a little early. That will be Mike next. Hi, Mike.
Hi there.
Hi, great. So we're having kind of a conversation here. We had a few questions coming in for you. Can I just read one thing that a person said, and then you can maybe address it a little bit, because I think it's important to talk a bit more about CAPS, and maybe you can respond a little bit to what Sumi said in her comments. So what we can say here is one audience member said that she thought that CAPS was being mischaracterized, and she said actually the study showed that using the stoves did not reduce pneumonia, but that the reductions in smoke exposure did result in reduced pneumonia. So we're getting a little technical here, but in the more fine academic research technical side, I'm sure you're happy with that. And she said the gap was that using the stoves did not result in consistent reductions in smoke, which is where we need to dig deeper. Do you agree with her that the consistent reductions in smoke is where we need to dig deeper?
No, I don't agree at all. I think I'm not going to get into a debate about the particulars, but I'd encourage people to read the article in the Lancet and listen to Kevin on the webinar. I think what's really disappointing from my perspective is that the study wasn't mentioned in Sumi's presentation, despite being the largest study that seems to have been funded on looking at health impacts of switching cooking technologies. And I'm just overall disappointed that claims are being made without data to substantiate these claims. So, we can't really talk about things trending in the right direction, to quote a phrase. That's not the sort of language that academics will kind of recognize. We need to have hard data that says, is there or is there not a benefit from using these stoves? And unfortunately, I think over the years, the emphasis has been to make sort of claims about deforestation or about fuel efficiency or about time spent in collecting fuel without really any recourse to proper studies or proper data.
Well, I think that's a really important point, and not to be too provocative, but we did have another question for you, particularly on deforestation. Unfortunately, there's not a link to a study in this person's comment, though, so we take that with a grain of salt, but it is from our audience. And this person says, I'm working in Zambia, and here we're losing 300,000 hectares of forest every year because of charcoal production for the use of firewoods and cooking. So is it possible that in some places they are experiencing deforestation and not only forest degradation, as you mentioned in your presentation?
So I would home in on the word because there and say, where is the evidence that the loss to forest is due to charcoal production? So I'm doing a study in Ghana at the moment looking at charcoal production, and we're finding some quite surprising things about where forest is being, cover is being lost, and where land's being turned to scrub, why the land is being cleared, and actually where the charcoal is going, because We were surprised to find in Ghana, for example, there's a large amount of companies that are exporting charcoal from Ghana to the West. So who's using the fuel, who's cutting the trees down, why is it being cut down, and actually where is it going? And we really need to kind of ask those questions rather than just making assumptions that loss of trees is because of charcoal production, for example.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. And just to go back to CAPS, this isn't a question, but just for everyone, just as Mike was mentioning the Lancet study, I will try to put that link through to all of you. There's as well kind of a commentary with it, so if you want to get more in-depth into that, I'll put that link up for you. And let me just go to our last speaker, Simon, because we had quite a few questions coming in for you. And thank you, Mike. Thanks so much for those. And those are very, foundational and fundamental questions. Do we have the proof to say that this about forests or this about health? And I think that's a really crucial perspective to bring in. And that's also the point about evidence-based advocacy. That is exactly where we want to go there. So hopefully this is fruitful, in kind of pushing that conversation forward. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
So to go to Simon, and let me just have a look at the questions, because we did have quite a few come in during Simon's presentation, and I'm not quite sure exactly which one to pick. Simon, you've seen most of them. I've been sending those through to you. Ed and I have been sending those through to you. I think there's one clarification we need to make real quick, because there was some confusion over whether you're talking about a solar cooker or whether you're talking about cooking powered by photovoltaic panels. Can you clarify that first?
Yeah, very simply, I'm not talking solar cooker. I believe that solar cookers, somebody asked a question about the focal ones, and they have found some traction in China and more recently in South Africa, but they require people to stand in the sun and cook, and that has always been a big problem with solar cookers. So we're not talking that at all. We're talking about an established technology, solar photovoltaics, and just using them in a different way, a way that strangely enough has not been used, but it's not strange in the sense that the price point is not yet there. The price point will be there in 2020, and that's what we need to prepare for.
Okay, so we have to have a longer view here, but really it's not that long, is it? It's only a few years. I mean, how are we going to prepare for that in just 3 years? We've had all these 2020 goals, and suddenly the day is here. How do we actually get there?
That's when the price point will tip, and that's when some countries like China might realize that it's a possibility and start flooding the African market with cookers that are not quality controlled, that are perhaps not the best use of that energy. So over the last 3 to 4 years, I and various colleagues in universities and elsewhere in the slides that I didn't quite get to, have actually undertaken behavioral studies. We've looked at willingness to pay, we've looked at quality issues, we've looked at insulation, so making sure that the energy at the pot is used in the best possible way. For instance, a cheap Chinese hot plate actually throws away a lot of the energy down below. If you just insulate the bottom, it points it back up at the pot. These sorts of things will make the difference between people who are at the bottom of the pyramid paying, being fooled into thinking that they're going to have an electrical system that they can afford, and suddenly finding out that it's costing them more than they expected. And our preparation is all about protecting them by setting up a scaled process that will deliver quality goods.
Thank you so much, Simon. So I think we will close the webinar here. At this stage, I'd just really like to thank everyone for staying with us. I know we had quite a long webinar today, but clearly there's a lot of commitment in the audience to hear about these issues and to dig a little deeper, as one person put it. And I'd like to thank all of the speakers for being here with us today. You know, we've heard presentations that have really spanned you know, policy and practice, technologies and the social lives of people, and particularly of women and children. So thank you for being here with us today. There is a survey, a very short one, that will pop up after the webinar. If you'd like to answer that, but as well tomorrow around this time you'll be receiving links to the slides normally, to most of the slides at least, and because I know that is always a question in the audience is, can we see the slides? And you definitely can. They will be on our website, and let me just pop that down here, but it'll come through to you via an email tomorrow as well. So that will be on the Smart Villages website, but we'd also just like to express our thanks for LCEDN, who has once again co-organized a great webinar with us here today. So thank you, everybody, and I hope that we can do a follow-up webinar on clean cooking, on clean fuels, and all of these things, and deepen our thinking on these topics and challenge ourselves. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.